Hi, this is Kirk from Ternpoint Solutions. In this video, we'll be looking at vendor certifications. Vendor certifications allows you to track certifications like BRC, ISO certification, or organic certifications, and make sure that when you're ordering items from a vendor that you have a valid certificate on file before you actually are able to release a purchase order. So first off, let's open up one of our vendors here. So we're going to look at our Spice World vendor, and we'll see on this vendor card, this is where I can actually set up some of the vendor certifications here. So under vendor, I can set up what this vendor, if this vendor is part of an industry type. So if it's a raw material supplier or it's a services supplier, then I can actually attach a number of certificate documents to this industry type. And so that those are validated in terms of releasing a purchase order. I can also set up vendor certificates here on the vendor for specific vendor and item combination as well. So I have an organic certificate here that we'll look at today as part of this demonstration. So for this certificate, I've set it up as the type it's going to be for this vendor and item combination. So whenever I'm ordering this organic onion powder from our Spice World vendor, the system will check to make sure we have a valid organic certification on file for this vendor before I can release the purchase order. And as we can see here, this certificate is now expired because it expired before today's date. So I wanted to have that in place so we could see how that works when we actually enter in a purchase order. Okay, let's go back to our purchase orders and we'll look at an open purchase order that I created earlier for this vendor. So at this vendor, I'm going to open up this purchase order. So I have a purchase order created for this vendor and our organic onion powder. And I have my quantities all filled in and ready to go. When I try to release this purchase order, I'll get a message telling me that a valid unexpired certificate cannot be found. So I can't release the purchase order. I'll have to reach out to this vendor and get an updated certificate to make sure that I have something on file to prove that there's been recent testing that this item is still organically certified. So go back to that certificate for that vendor, our Spice World vendor here. Okay, let's open that up. And we'll add a new certificate line for that certificate to make sure that's now valid. So let's open up our vendor certificates here. I'll reopen the certificate. Okay, I can leave this certificate here on file because I already have an attached certificate against it where I can do my document attachments, or I can add a new certificate below. So I'm going to add a new one here. So I'm going to go to create a certificate line. Okay, so it knows that based on this certificate type, there's an organic certificate required. And I'm actually going to put in here 0702 of this year to 070124. Okay. I don't necessarily need to update a certificate and drag and drop one in. I can if I wish, but as long as I have a valid certificate on file here, the system's going to allow this. So I'm going to release this certificate again and go back to our purchase order that we had open here. Let's try to re-release that purchase order so that we'll see that the system has now recognized we have a valid certificate on file. Okay, release this now, and you'll see now my purchase order is now able to be released because I have a valid certificate on file. So we can set these certificates up for things like, ISO or organic certification, as I mentioned. You can also use these vendor certificates as part of the vendor onboarding process to make sure that you can't enter purchase orders for this vendor industry type, for instance, until you have a vendor onboarding where you're checking, banking information or things like that, or posting groups, make sure the vendor's set up, correctly. So you can set up the certificate to manage things that way as well. So to learn more about vendor certificates and how it can help your business, check us out on AppSource or reach out to us at info@ternpoint.solutions. Thank you.